Hello, FOSDEM. My name is Will Daly, and welcome to my talk, Aretext, a minimalist text editor with vim-compatible key bindings. A little bit about me. I'm currently employed at Microsoft, where I get to write Go code and work on things with Kubernetes and networking. But this talk isn't about any of that. It's about a side project I've been working on for about the last 2 years called Aretext. Aretext is a terminal-based text editor that's written in Go. It's free and open source software under the GPL v3 license. Who is it for? If you are the kind of developer that lives in the terminal and you know Vim key bindings and you don't use a lot of plugins or Vim script, you like to keep things simple, then Aretext might be the editor for you. I can kind of think of this as a set intersection of people that use Vim and live in the terminal and like minimalist software. But I'm actually not sure if that is just a weird thing about me. I'm the only person that meets those criteria, or if there are other folks out there that would find this useful. So we'll see. It's Vim compatible. And the reason is that I started using Vim in the early 2000s at a time when I was a teenager and I didn't know much about really anything about life or development or people. But I did know that Vim was really awesome magic, and it let me edit really, really efficiently. So at this point, I've got about 20 years of muscle memory built up. And if, like me, you are familiar with Vim key bindings, then Aretext is going to feel immediately comfortable. The things that you already know will just work in the editor. To give a quick demo of that, I'm going to show a recording of an editing session where I'm implementing a function to generate the Fibonacci sequence using a recursive algorithm. And as we're watching this recording, you can kind of see that the editor is jumping back and forth between normal mode and insert mode. It's using copy and paste. It's using normal mode commands to edit the document really efficiently. And in just a second, we're going to see a little bit of visual mode when that Fibonacci function gets copied and moved down below the main function right there. So this almost just looks like Vim. I sometimes actually get confused when I'm using Vim or Aretext, like which one I'm in, because they're so similar. Unlike Vim, though, Aretext is a minimalist text editor. What I mean by that is it has a small number of very carefully chosen features that compose together to create the editing experience. The goal is to create an editor where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and there are as few parts as possible. The result is a simple and powerful editing experience that's still simple to understand and extend. So when I say a small number of features, which features am I talking about? In this talk, we're going to see 4: auto reload, a searchable menu, rule-based configuration, and custom commands. And we're going to see how these work together to create that really powerful editing experience I mentioned before. All right, so feature number 1, auto reload. Folks that work in the terminal know that there are a lot of commands you can run that will change files on disk. The text editor is not special in this way. It's just one other program that's part of a larger workflow. So if you git check out a branch, if you run a code formatter, and lots of other things I'm sure you can think of, the files can change on disk. And because Aretext isn't special in that way, it will do the right thing and simply auto reload. Okay, so a quick demo. I have open here an HTTP server, and we're going to make some edits to this function that's going to mess up the formatting a little bit. So we're going to change the indentation level of a few things. And I'm going to go ahead and go format -w main.go. Go ahead and save this first so my changes are saved. And when I run that, I can see that Aretext just reloads the document because there are no unsaved changes. So the next feature we're going to talk about is the searchable menu. The goal of this feature is to let you find stuff quickly. In particular, commands you might want to run or files you might want to open. So we're now in the Kubernetes Git repository. I'm going to open up Aretext. And when I press : it's going to open up this command prompt that lets me type in the name of the command that I want to run. In this case, I'm going to type find so that I can find and open a file. When I press enter, it's going to populate that same menu with a list of files in the repository, which I can filter in exactly the same way. By the way, this is a fuzzy search, so if I accidentally mistype something, or misspell, or miss a letter, it will usually find the item I'm looking for anyway. Once I'm inside the file, I can run additional menu commands to toggle on and off line numbers or syntax highlighting. This is sort of a replacement for Vim's X mode, except a little more discoverable because it's searchable. However, the shortcuts that you would usually use in X mode also work here. So in particular, if I type WQ exclamation point, it's going to alias that to always surface force save document and quit as the first item. The next feature we're going to talk about is rule-based configuration. This lets you configure the editor with confidence for particular file types or projects you might be working on. The whole configuration file is a single YAML file that's a list of rules. Each rule matches a file pattern using this glob star pattern that we see here. In this example, we're looking at a rule for JSON files that sets the tab size, the syntax language, and various other settings. Now let's say that you're working on a project that has a different convention for JSON files, where the tab size should be 4 spaces instead of 2. It's very easy to model this in Aretext by simply adding another rule that says to override the tab size to 4 for files in the My Project subdirectory. Now the fourth feature we're going to talk about is custom commands. This gives you commands that you might want to run in the terminal at your fingertips inside of the editor. So to add one of these commands, I'm going to use Aretext edit config to open up that YAML file that I mentioned earlier. We're going to go down to the list of menu commands here. And I can see that there's a command here that is echo, which is just running echo and piping it to less. I'm going to modify that command and save. And now when I open the editor, I can see that echo appears in the menu items. And when I run it, it does what I expect and says, hello FOSDEM. So we're now going to see a few examples of how we can leverage this very simple feature of running shell commands from inside the editor in a bunch of different ways to provide some really powerful functionality. We're also going to see how this interacts with the other features we've talked about earlier in interesting ways. So for example, in many projects, you'll have some command that's building the project or maybe running tests. Those are often very project specific. So in one project, you might use make, in another, you might use gulp. Well, we know how to add menu commands, and we know how to make those commands project specific using the rule-based configuration feature that we saw earlier. These two things work together to produce a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. Another example, let's say you have a menu command to run a code formatter on the current file. Well, when the code formatter runs, it's going to modify that file on disk. How does the editor know to reload it to get the changes? Well, we already have auto reload. This is exactly the same as if you were running that formatting command just from another terminal session. Final example here is grep. So here's an example where we're using the rip-grep tool to search for the word under the cursor. And the output of that command is going to be a list of locations where the word is located in the project. Well, often we're going to want to then jump to one of those locations in the editor. What's a great way to select that specific file to open? Well, we can use the exact same searchable menu functionality that we've already seen by setting mode file locations. And we're going to quickly demo that now. So here we are back in the Kubernetes repository in that same file we saw earlier. I have my cursor over the word kube services chain. And when I execute the grep command that I defined, it's going to look for results that contain that word and populate the menu with the different file locations. Since this is the same searchable menu, I can search it using the same fuzzy search that we used before. And when I press enter, it opens the file at that location. Custom commands are a very powerful feature, and there are many more things you can use them for, as described in the Aretext documentation. Some examples here: you can insert a snippet from another file. You could open a document in a separate tmux window, integrate with the system clipboard, run git blame, or a bunch of other things. So in conclusion, Aretext is a terminal-based, vim-compatible, and minimalist text editor. It's actually been my primary editor now for close to a year, and I've done all development in Aretext during that year. It's stable enough to use for real work. But that said, it's still in beta, and in fact, version 0.4 was just released a couple of weeks ago. And the main reason why is that until now, I've been pretty much the only person using it, and I feel uncomfortable sort of stabilizing at a 1.0 if I haven't gotten any feedback or other use cases that people might want to use this for. So please, if this has resonated with you, install it, try it out, send feedback, open bugs, really looking to kind of widen the user base to make this as awesome an editor as it can possibly be. And if you're interested in contributing to the project, it's a very approachable code base. It's about 20,000 lines of Go code, excluding tests and auto-generated code. Relatively straightforward to get into. And there's a lot of work to be done. There are new vim commands to implement, new syntax languages to support, and new platforms to package the editor for. If you have expertise in these areas, any help you can provide would be very much appreciated. Finally, if you're interested in learning more, the website, aretext.org, has detailed installation and configuration instructions. And the code is available on GitHub at github.com/aretext/aretext. Thank you so much for your time today, and enjoy the rest of FOSDEM.